Hey everybody, it's your boy, and it's about time that I talk about Matt Hancock. Not for too long, because he doesn't deserve a long video on him. This is the man alongside those AIDS and SAGE and other pseudo-scientific people and organisations. This is the man that alongside all the others convinced Boris Johnson to ditch the herd immunity plan, which would have made us follow policy along the lines of what Sweden would later do, to full-on lockdown, which happened not just in April of that year, but it happened 3 times. This is the man that continuously banged the drum over and over and over again about the need to lockdown, to save the NHS, to do this, to do that. He was the one that alongside Boris Johnson were giving the police powers to break into people's homes who they felt were breaking the COVID restrictions, to arrest people who, at least in the beginning of the lockdowns, although since it's beginning to get a lot less severe, were getting arrested for sitting on park benches with nobody around. He was also the one that was continuously fear-mongering and trying to scare people into conforming to these mandates/laws. They have admitted to using totalitarian tactics in order to make people comply to these restrictions. And he was one of the primary proponents of this legislation. We all knew, just from looking at what little we could see from the government's reaction to the pandemic, and that he was a very bad Minister of Health. But that's only because we could only see what was right in front of us. Then Dominic Cummings comes out after he unceremoniously left the government. We see that Matt Hancock was worse than we initially feared he was. In fact, he was so bad that even Boris Johnson called him hopeless. In the build-up to the lockdown, he was failing to do his job. There wasn't a lot of information going around. There was conflicting information as well. And Hancock was just, well, being hopeless. And now, after so-called Freedom Day has been delayed for 4 weeks, 2 new stories come out about Matt Hancock. First, that he withheld key information from Boris Johnson during the meeting where the ultimate decision to delay or to allow so-called Freedom Day to go ahead was held. This key information was incredibly important, and this is something that he had well in advance, and was something that Boris Johnson didn't know, and that was that actually the current Pfizer and AstraZeneca vaccines that seem to be the overwhelming majority of the vaccines in this country and also in Europe, were actually very successful in preventing hospitalisation if one happens to catch the new Indian/Delta variant and also the Kent variant. So not only was it good at stamping out the original one it was designed for, but it's actually pretty good for the new variants. Hancock withheld that, and we only found out barely a few days to a week after the decision was made by Boris Johnson to delay it because cases with this new variant were going up, even though concurrently deaths had actually gone down and were not even reaching double figures anymore. Why did Matt Hancock refuse to give Boris Johnson that information which could have made him think otherwise? Well, we don't know. Some people think he did it on purpose for whatever reason. Others think he's just hopeless, incompetent, and that's why he didn't tell Boris Johnson. I personally am cynical enough to believe he did it on purpose for his own nefarious reasons. He probably has business interests that would like this semi-lockdown to continue because, well, think about it, competition, at least those of the smaller variety, will be further strained and possibly even destroyed by ongoing restrictions. There's many other reasons why we could speculate that he withheld information. He essentially, whether he meant to or not, lied by omission to the Prime Minister, and that alone is a sackable offence. But despite the fact that Boris Johnson was initially thinking about doing that and replacing him with somebody else, Michael Gove of all people, he didn't do it. But Boris Johnson, when he called Matt Hancock hopeless, was probably just being angry. He probably didn't even mean it, because his revealed preference over the 15-month nightmare that has been COVID Britain has been to keep him and to support him. And now for this next bombshell story. For you see, during lockdown, he was getting a little bit frisky with one of his aides. He was having an affair, one could say, which is in complete contravention of COVID guidelines, where it stated that we, the British people, could not have sex with strangers. Because you see, Britain became a Sharia-compliant state during lockdown. Now, admittedly, this woman is not a stranger. But she's a work colleague. And as far as the guidelines stated, he still couldn't have sex with her because she was not really a part of his family bubble. And he could potentially still get COVID from her because, well, she has her own family, she has her own friends that she interacts with, and that could potentially carry the disease to him. He's not the only person who linked to the government who has done this. Neil Ferguson, the man who came up with the lockdown plan for Britain, the failed epidemiologist who wasn't even a qualified epidemiologist, also had an affair and was breaking the lockdown rules in order to meet be his bit on the side. That was during the lockdown, the first one, I do believe. Even though he left his job, the government still used him as an advisor. But what's worse is that Matt Hancock has actually been caught in the act. There are photos of him and his lover snogging. Look at it! Caught red-handed, snogging, breaking COVID guidelines. And yet he will not resign. He refuses to. But of course he's very, very sorry and has let people down. And not only that, he has the gall to demand privacy on this personal matter, despite the fact that this very much is a sex scandal that is of public interest. It matters to us because he is the one that has helped institute these terrible guidelines that has killed thousands of people. And I'm not just talking about the virus. I'm talking about cancer or diabetes or any other kind of disease that might be life-threatening, but with the right treatment, with enough treatment, you can be saved. Those people could be alive today, but a lot of them will not be. And that is by his own government's acknowledgement recently. The man didn't even apologise to his wife in his statement. He just said, "I'm sorry that I breached the social distancing guidelines," letting people down and being very sorry for himself, which he clearly isn't. He doesn't care. This is a non-apology. Apparently, he remains focused on working to get the country out of this pandemic. Well, for all intents and purposes, even though the Delta variant has risen, it will eventually go down again anyway, because even in India, where it was really bad, it dropped like a stone afterwards. And considering deaths have gone down, there is no excuse but to lift restrictions, but he doesn't want to do that anyway. Apparently, even Boris Johnson has once again cooked to him and accepted his apology, which means we won't be seeing his sacking. He will once again be allowed to poison Britain with his terrible performance as health secretary. According to The Sun, the pictures taken at the time were before restrictions were lifted, where essentially single adults, as I mentioned before, were banned from having casual sex. We also were not allowed to hug people. Meanwhile, this man and Neil Ferguson were having sex whenever they felt like and snogging in the office. And according to a whistleblower, they were regularly caught snogging and having clinches with each other. They couldn't even keep it secret, and yet until now, nobody spilled the beans. This is the problem with the Tory party and the Tory government. They are so party driven, they are so irrationally loyal to this party that has no inherent principle and doesn't stand for anything anyway, that they don't break their silence until after the restrictions in regards to having sex and hugging people and shaking hands, other things like that, were lifted. The perfect timing was to release that information there and then, and they failed because they're too loyal. And only now, after he's been in much more public scrutiny thanks to Dominic Cummings and others, that they now feel brave enough to do it. Too little, too late. The man is safe and secure in his job. It would take a miracle, in my opinion, for Boris Johnson to sack this man, because not only is Boris Johnson weak, he also seems to like Matt, and even if he is hopeless. I don't know why. I wish I could give you an answer for that, but I just don't. So anyway, guys, what more is there to say other than this brazen hypocrisy will once again not have the consequences that it deserves, and we will once again potentially see another delay as autumn approaches, because you can damn well be certain that they will try to do that. So until next time, I'll see you all later.